Humanity stood on the brink of an event that would change everything for them, and for the universe as a whole. It was the first moment of direct contact between humans and the Xantari, an ancient and powerful alien race that controlled vast stretches of the galaxy. The humans were excited but nervous. Their mission was simple: establish peaceful relations with a species that had the technology to obliterate them in seconds. But despite the risks, Earth's leaders believed in diplomacy. They believed the best path forward was one of cooperation. Captain Alina Cruz stood at the helm of the Earth delegation. Her nerves steady, though her heart raced. This moment was everything. Years of preparation had led to this. It wasn't just about politics or securing humanity's future. It was about survival. The room was tense as the humans prepared to board the Xantari mothership, the air thick with anticipation. Every member of the delegation knew the risks, but Captain Cruz had a secret weapon. It was small, it was harmless, but she believed it might make all the difference. Max, a golden retriever, was her companion, and she knew that if anyone could disarm the tense alien minds, it would be him. He had a gift, an uncanny ability to connect with anyone, even the most wary souls, even creatures far more dangerous than any human could imagine. And so it was that when the humans boarded the grand chamber of the Xantari, it wasn't just Captain Cruz who stepped into the meeting, but also Max and Whiskers, her cat. The Xantari were immediately struck by the sight of these strange creatures. At first their reactions were ones of confusion and disdain. The Xantari were a race of warlords known for their fierce strength and unparalleled technological prowess. They saw no value in pets. To them, animals were either resources or obstacles, not companions. But the humans weren't intimidated by their towering presence or their cold eyes. Instead, Captain Cruz simply smiled and nodded before bending down to let Max sniff the air. The Xantari officials exchanged nervous glances. The very idea of keeping an animal as a pet was so foreign to them, it seemed almost beneath them. The delegate assigned to lead the meeting, a tall and imposing figure known as Shalak, spoke in a voice that echoed through the room, asking why these humans would risk bringing creatures so beneath them into such a critical situation. Captain Cruz didn't hesitate. She calmly explained that Max was more than a pet. He was a companion, a friend who had been with her through thick and thin. She explained that humans shared a unique bond with the creatures around them, one that brought comfort and peace, even in the most hostile of environments. The Xantari were unconvinced, but they were intrigued when Max sat by her side and calmly laid down. They watched as the dog rolled over playfully, then turned to face the Xantari with his tail wagging. What happened next stunned the entire room. As the Xantari gazed upon Max, a sudden shift took place, a change in the air that no one had expected. The deadly predator known as the Xanthox, a beast from the Xantari homeworld, entered the room without warning, its sleek black body moving with terrifying speed and precision. The room went deathly silent. All eyes were on the Xanthox, a creature with long, serrated claws capable of tearing through armor and flesh alike. It looked directly at the humans and began to approach with lethal intent. Yet Captain Cruz didn't flinch. She slowly stood and without hesitation extended her hand toward the creature. As it neared, the Xantari watched in disbelief. They had never seen such bravery in the face of death. Max stood beside her, his tail wagging, and the room held its breath as the creature loomed closer. But instead of striking, it stopped, sniffed the air, and then it did something that no one had expected. It lowered its head to the ground and let out a low growl before sitting at her feet. The Xantari were frozen in stunned silence. They had just witnessed something that seemed impossible. Humans could pet anything. The room was still in stunned silence, the Xantari delegates unable to comprehend what they had just witnessed. The Xanthox, a creature known for its brutality, had not only refrained from attacking, but had lowered itself before the humans. Captain Cruz stood tall, her hand gently resting on Max's back as the dog wagged his tail happily. The room's atmosphere was thick with disbelief, a moment of uncertainty that stretched on far longer than anyone could have expected. Shellac, the lead Xantari representative, slowly straightened, his features still unreadable. His piercing eyes flicked between the humans, their calm demeanor, and the now docile Xanthox. He spoke at last, his voice steady yet laced with disbelief. "What sorcery is this? he demanded. "How is it that this creature obeys you so easily?" Captain Cruz met his gaze, her voice calm but unwavering. "It's not magic, Commander. It's understanding. Humans have an innate bond with animals, one that goes beyond fear or dominance. We don't seek to control them. We seek to understand them." The Xantari were not satisfied. They had conquered countless species, subjugated them, and bent them to their will. They had no concept of this understanding that the humans spoke of. To them, the ability to tame such a beast seemed beyond the realms of possibility. "This is no mere coincidence," Shalak muttered under his breath, his mind racing. "Perhaps a fluke, a rare occurrence. But we must test this further." The Xantari had a reputation for testing the limits of other species, and the humans would not be an exception. Shalak's mind was set, and he ordered a new challenge to be brought forward. He turned to Captain Cruz, his eyes narrowed. "If you truly have this ability, then prove it," he said, his voice carrying the weight of a command. "We will bring forth creatures far more dangerous than the Xantox. If you can tame them, we will know the truth." Captain Cruz exchanged a brief glance with her team. They had come prepared, but no one could have predicted just how far the Xantari would push them. Still, the humans had one advantage: bravery in the face of the unknown. Cruz nodded, signaling her readiness. Moments later, the massive doors to the chamber opened with a deep, resonating groan, and instrode the first of many terrifying creatures, the Skreth. Towering over the humans at over 10 feet tall, the Skreth was a venomous, multi-limbed beast with scales that shimmered darkly, its red eyes glowing ominously. It hissed, its sharp talons scraping against the floor as it stalked toward the humans. Its breath was heavy, laden with the stink of decay and hostility. The Xantari watched, their anticipation growing. This was no ordinary creature. The Skreth had killed numerous Xantari soldiers, and no one had ever dared get close enough to tame it. It was an apex predator, feared by all. Captain Cruz didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, Max following her closely. The Skreth snarled, its spiny tail lashing in the air, but Cruz remained calm. She squatted down slowly, offering a steady hand to the creature. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, as she spoke to it in a tone of reassurance. The room was silent except for the low growl of the Skreth as it studied her with wary eyes. Seconds stretched into what felt like hours. Then, slowly, the Skreth took a tentative step closer, its nostrils flaring as it sniffed the air. It was an excruciating moment, but Captain Cruz held her ground. Max sat beside her, his presence offering a sense of comfort. And then, as if by magic, the Skreth's tense posture relaxed. It lowered its massive head and allowed Captain Cruz to gently stroke the rough scales along its neck. The room exploded in gasps of astonishment. The Skreth, a creature that no one had ever dared approach, now accepted the human's presence. Shalak stood motionless, his jaw slightly agape as he processed what had just happened. This was no fluke. It wasn't magic. It was something deeper, something none of the Xantari could comprehend. The humans weren't just taming animals. They were connecting with them on an entirely different level. The question that lingered in the air was no longer how, but why. The Xantari had expected submission, fear, or perhaps even violence. What they had witnessed instead was the power of empathy, something far more dangerous to their worldview than they could have ever imagined. Captain Cruz glanced at her team, her eyes filled with resolve. This was just the beginning. The test had only just begun. The chamber was in chaos. The Xantari delegates murmured among themselves, their voices rising in disbelief as they tried to process what had just happened. The Skreth, a creature that had killed dozens of their warriors, was now resting calmly at Captain Cruz's feet, accepting the human's touch with a sense of trust that no one could explain. Shalak's cold, calculating gaze never left the humans, though his face betrayed no emotion. This was a moment that defied everything he and his people knew about strength, power, and control. Captain Cruz stood silently, her hand still resting on the Skreth's rough, scaled neck. She could feel the creature's heartbeat slow, its tension easing as it accepted her presence. Max sat obediently beside her, his tail wagging as he observed the Skreth, no hint of fear in his demeanor. To Cruz, this was just another day, another animal to understand. But to the Xantari, this was something they couldn't fathom. "Impossible," muttered one of the Xantari officers, stepping forward with a look of utter disbelief on his face. "How could you? How could this animal trust you?" Captain Cruz met his gaze, her expression unwavering. "It's not about dominance. It's about understanding. Animals aren't machines to be controlled. They have instincts, emotions. We listen to them." The words hung in the air, but they were as foreign to the Xantari as the concept of peace itself. Their empire had been built on the strength of their military, on the ability to dominate and conquer. They had never known empathy as a form of power, and this new revelation threatened the very core of their understanding. Shalak's thoughts were racing, trying to make sense of it all. A species capable of such a deep connection with the creatures they shared their world with. Could it be true? Was there really such a gift among the humans? The Xantari had always believed that mastery over nature, over the beasts that roamed their planets, was a mark of true strength. But these humans didn't control the animals. They befriended them, understood them, and the animals responded in kind. Dr. Talar, the Xantari's lead scientist, spoke up for the first time, his voice filled with cautious curiosity. There must be an explanation, some hidden factor, some biochemical anomaly that allows this level of interaction. No species can connect with such diverse creatures without some form of unnatural influence. Captain Cruz turned to face him, her expression soft, but resolute. "It's not a scientific anomaly, Dr. Talar. It's simply who we are. Humans have evolved alongside animals for millennia, and in doing so, we've developed a unique sense of empathy. It's not a weapon. It's not magic. It's a gift." The room fell silent as the weight of her words sank in. The Xantari had believed they were the pinnacle of intelligence and power in the galaxy. Their superiority was unquestioned, their methods of domination effective for millennia. But now, they were being forced to confront a reality they had never considered, a reality where strength was not defined by physical power or technological might, but by the ability to understand, to connect, and to care. The Skreth, which had once been a deadly force of nature, now lay quietly beside Captain Cruz, its dangerous claws folded neatly beneath its massive frame. The atmosphere in the room had shifted. What had started as an interrogation had now become an unsettling moment of revelation. The Xantari were beginning to realize that they had underestimated the humans. They had expected violence, force, perhaps even resistance. But what they had seen was something far more unsettling, a different kind of power, one that was unquantifiable and uncontrollable. Shalak took a step back, his eyes still locked on the humans, now keenly aware that they had tapped into something profound, something that the Xantari didn't understand. And in the back of his mind, a thought began to form. Was this the future of the galaxy? A future where power didn't lie in weapons or warships, but in empathy and understanding. The idea was uncomfortable, perhaps even dangerous, to the empire that had ruled for so long. But the question remained, if the humans could tame anything, what did that mean for the rest of the galaxy? Could they change the fabric of everything the Xantari held dear? Or was there something even more dangerous hidden within the humans' connection to the animals of the universe? The Xantari knew one thing for sure. They needed answers, and they needed them fast. The room was thick with tension as the Xantari delegates continued to watch in stunned silence, their eyes flicking between Captain Cruz and the various creatures gathered around her. The once imposing Skreth was now lounging comfortably at her feet, while Max and Whiskers moved about without fear, as if they were simply in their element. The human's calm and unwavering presence was the only thing that seemed to make sense in this increasingly confusing scenario. It was clear now that the human's abilities went far beyond what anyone had anticipated. Shelleck's thoughts churned, his mind grappling with what he had just witnessed. He had been prepared for a meeting that might result in tension, but this was beyond anything he had expected. The humans had come to demonstrate their diplomatic strength, their resolve to foster peace, but what they had inadvertently shown was something far more profound. An ability to communicate with creatures in a way that no species, not even the Xantari, could match. This gift of empathy, of truly understanding animals, was something no one could replicate, or so they thought. As if to test their limits further, Shelleck stepped forward, his face unreadable. Enough with these trivial tests. I want a demonstration. A true test of your gift, as you call it. I want to see if you can tame what we have never been able to control, he demanded. His words were heavy with challenge, as if daring the humans to fail. Captain Cruz hesitated for a brief moment, considering the implications of what Shelleck was asking, but she knew that there was no turning back. This was no longer just about establishing peace. It was about showing the Xantari, and perhaps the galaxy, that there was power beyond military might. With a deep breath, she nodded. Shelleck raised his hand, signaling for the next creature to be brought forth. The massive chamber doors opened once more, and a creature unlike any the humans had seen before entered the room. The Xantari had summoned the Urkik. The Urkik was a beast from the depths of the Xantari homeworld, a terrifying monstrosity that was infamous across the galaxy for its speed, strength, and aggression. Standing nearly 12 feet tall, with dark, armored skin and glowing red eyes, it looked every bit the predator it was. Its 6 muscular legs allowed it to move with unnerving agility, and its jaw, lined with razor-sharp teeth, dripped with venom. This was a creature that had brought terror to even the mightiest of the Xantari warriors. It was the perfect test of humanity's so-called gift. The Urkik let out a guttural growl as it stalked toward the humans, its eyes fixed on them with deadly intent. The room held its breath, waiting to see if the humans would falter, if they would show even a hint of fear. The Xantari watched with cold calculation, certain that no one could tame such a beast. But Captain Cruz remained calm. She stepped forward slowly, her body poised and steady, as Max trotted by her side, ever the faithful companion. She didn't flinch. She didn't hesitate. With each step, the humans seemed to exude a quiet, undeniable confidence that spoke louder than words. As Cruz approached the Urkik, the creature's red eyes locked onto hers. It snarled, its teeth flashing as it bared them, its muscles tensing in preparation to strike. The room was so silent that even the faintest breath seemed like a thunderclap. For a long, nerve-wracking moment, nothing happened. The Urkik stared at Cruz, as if waiting for her to make the first move. And then, with a soft but resolute voice, she spoke. "It's okay," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "You don't have to be afraid." The words seemed to hang in the air, and the tension in the room grew thick. The Urkik's body froze, its hackles rising as it studied the human. But Captain Cruz did not back away. She stepped closer, her eyes locked with the creature's, speaking to it without fear, without dominance, just pure understanding. To everyone's shock, the Urkik's aggressive stance began to soften. The growl subsided, and the beast hesitated, then slowly lowered its head. It was as if Captain Cruz's words had pierced through the cloud of rage that surrounded it, reaching something deep within the creature's instincts. The room's occupants gasped in disbelief as the Urkik, the beast of nightmares, stood still, no longer a threat. The Xantari were paralyzed, staring at the scene unfolding before them. Their scientific minds scrambled for an explanation, but none came. This wasn't science. This wasn't anything they could rationalize or control. It was pure, unadulterated empathy. Captain Cruz reached out slowly, her hand hovering just above the Urkik's massive head. For a brief moment, the creature looked up at her, as if weighing the decision. And then, incredibly, it allowed her to gently touch its scaled skin. The room exploded in gasps and whispers. Shelek stood motionless, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and disbelief. What had they just witnessed? This wasn't simply a matter of training animals or taming beasts. The humans had connected with the very soul of the creature. They hadn't dominated it. They had calmed it. They had reached something deep within, something that no other species had even dreamed of. It was clear now. Humanity had a gift far beyond what anyone could understand, a gift that could change the course of the galaxy itself. The room remained in stunned silence as the Archik stood motionless before Captain Kruz, its massive head bowed in submission. Max, the golden retriever, sat quietly by her side, his tail wagging with a contentment that contrasted sharply with the tension in the air. The Xantari were still processing what they had just witnessed, their once imposing demeanor faltering in the wake of the humans' incredible demonstration. Shelek, the Xantari commander, was the first to break the silence. His voice, usually commanding and filled with authority, now carried an edge of uncertainty. "This is impossible," he muttered, almost to himself. "There must be a trick, a way to explain this." But even as he spoke, his eyes remained fixed on the humans, still in disbelief at the display of calm and control. Captain Kruz, her hand still resting gently on the Urkek's armored skin, didn't immediately respond. She was focused, her connection to the creature solidifying in a way that was both instinctive and learned. Her ability to remain calm in the face of such an aggressive animal wasn't born of some extraordinary power. It was simply the result of a lifetime of experience, of understanding the unspoken language of the creatures she had spent years working with. As the Archik lowered its head further, Max moved closer, sniffing the beast curiously. The golden retriever's presence seemed to ease the Archik even more, and to the astonishment of everyone in the room, the creature let out a low, rumbling sound, not a growl, but something akin to a purr. The tension that had once filled the chamber began to dissipate, replaced by a strange sense of peace. The Xantari watched in shock, unable to reconcile the fact that these seemingly fragile humans, with their animals by their side, were capable of taming their deadliest creatures. For centuries, they had prided themselves on their ability to conquer any being that crossed their path. But now, standing before them, were beings who not only commanded respect, but had earned the trust of the very creatures that had once been beyond control. Shelek, unable to hide his astonishment, addressed Captain Kruz again. "Explain this to me. How is this possible? Your species, it defies everything we know about power, about control." Captain Kruz took a deep breath, finally standing fully upright as she withdrew her hand from the Urkik. She met Shelek's gaze with calm confidence. "It's not about control. It's about connection. We don't seek to dominate animals or force them into submission. We understand them, listen to them, and give them the space to trust us. It's a bond, not a chain." The words hung in the air like a challenge, forcing the Xantari to confront their own beliefs about power and dominance. For centuries, they had ruled through fear, through the might of their war machines and the unyielding power of their military forces. The idea that empathy could be a form of power, one that transcended violence, was something they could not easily accept. Shelek's eyes narrowed, and his voice dropped lower, tinged with a mix of curiosity and caution. "You are telling me that your strength lies in kindness." Captain Kruz nodded, her expression unwavering. "Yes, it's not kindness alone, but understanding. Empathy is the bridge that allows us to connect with creatures, and in turn, they trust us. That trust is what allows us to coexist with them in a way that no other species can, and it's that trust that can help us build relationships, not just with animals, but with each other, with the galaxy." There was a long pause as the Xantari processed her words. Shelek, though reluctant, seemed to sense the weight of what was happening. This was no longer just a demonstration of taming animals. This was a revelation that had the potential to reshape everything the Xantari knew about power, about the way they viewed other species, and about the future of the galaxy itself. "Dr. Talar," The lead scientist among the Xantari stepped forward, his voice tinged with both skepticism and awe. "But if empathy is the key to your power, then what does that mean for us? For the galaxy? Could your kind, could you bring such power to bear on us? On other species?" Captain Cruz's gaze softened, but her response was firm. "We don't want to control anyone. We want to work together. The strength to understand one another, whether it's through words, actions, or even simply listening, can bridge even the greatest of divides. That's what we're offering. A future where conflict doesn't define us, but cooperation does." The room was silent once more. The Xantari, whose empire had thrived on division and conquest, now found themselves facing a truth they hadn't expected. The humans weren't offering a path of dominance. They weren't asking for power over others. They were offering the opportunity for unity, for a future where understanding and mutual respect could replace centuries of war and distrust. Shalak, after what seemed like an eternity, finally spoke, his voice quieter than before. "You've made your point, humans. This changes everything. We have much to consider." Captain Cruz nodded, her expression earnest. "And we're willing to help in any way we can. Together, we can create something greater than either of us could alone." As the meeting drew to a close, the Xantari delegates remained deep in thought, their minds racing with the implications of what they had just witnessed. For the first time, they were forced to consider that the true power of the universe might not lie in conquering or controlling, but in understanding, in connection, and in empathy. And that thought, more than anything else, left them shaken. The chamber fell into an uneasy quiet as the last words of Captain Cruz echoed through the minds of the Xantari. Shalak stood motionless, his hand clenched around the hilt of his ceremonial blade, his thoughts far away. The other delegates remained just as still, their eyes reflecting a mixture of disbelief and contemplation. The idea that power could come from something as intangible as empathy was difficult to accept, especially for a species as militaristic as the Xantari. Captain Cruz, however, did not break the silence. She knew the significance of the moment and understood that the Xantari would need time to process everything they had seen. But she also knew that the humans' way of life, this unique connection with the creatures of the galaxy, held the potential to shift the balance of power in ways no one could have predicted. The tension was palpable, as if every breath taken in that room was laden with the weight of the future. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Shalak broke the silence. His voice was quieter now, his tone less authoritative, more contemplative. "I cannot deny what I've seen today," he said slowly. "Your bond with animals, your ability to forge connections where others have only seen dominance, is unlike anything we've encountered." The room hung on his words as the delegates exchanged uncertain glances. For the first time in their history, the Xantari were admitting to a flaw in their belief system. They had never considered that empathy could be a form of strength, let alone the key to unlocking interspecies peace. Captain Cruz remained calm, her voice even. "It's not just about animals. It's about how we see each other, how we understand one another. And it's a path we've walked for millennia. We don't just believe in the survival of the fittest. We believe in the survival of the connected." Shalak's gaze sharpened, a thought forming in his mind. "You claim that this ability, this understanding, can transcend species boundaries. But what of the other creatures of the galaxy? What of those who would see us fall, who would use force to conquer and destroy? Can this empathy protect us from them?" Captain Cruz didn't flinch. She had anticipated this question. Empathy doesn't mean we don't defend ourselves. It means we fight to protect, not to dominate. We don't have to annihilate to win. Our strength lies in the ability to find common ground, even with our enemies. The room fell into silence once more, as the Xantari absorbed her words. Their history had been written in blood, their every victory a testament to their ability to crush anything that stood in their way. The idea that war might not be the only solution, that the galaxy's conflicts could be resolved through understanding rather than conquest, was an alien thought to them. Dr. Toller, ever the skeptic, stepped forward with an analytical tone. This connection you speak of, it is beyond anything we've encountered. But what of the other races in the galaxy? Not all share your ability to form such bonds. How will your understanding work with them? Captain Cruz gave a small, knowing smile. We don't expect every species to possess the same gift we do. But we believe that understanding can be built in other ways, through dialogue, through respect, and through shared goals. It's not about forcing others to think like us. It's about finding a way to coexist. Shelek turned his back to the group, his eyes scanning the darkened horizon outside the chamber's windows. His mind raced as the weight of Captain Cruz's words continued to settle over him. There was no denying the power of the human's message. For the first time in his life, he wondered if there was a better way than the endless conquest the Xantari had waged for centuries. Could their empire be part of something larger, something greater? The question gnawed at him, and as he turned back to face the humans, he knew that the Xantari would have to decide where they stood in this new world, one where empathy, not violence, could define their future. We are not yet ready to embrace your vision, Shelek said, his voice heavy with thought. But we are willing to listen. Perhaps there is something to be learned from your ways. Captain Cruz nodded, her expression a mixture of hope and determination. That's all we ask, an opportunity to work together. The galaxy has enough room for all of us, if we choose to respect each other. Shelek's gaze lingered on her for a moment, before he turned to the rest of his delegates. The room was quiet, but the seed had been planted. The Xantari were now confronted with a choice that they had never before considered: to continue their path of conquest, or to embrace the possibility of a different future, one built on understanding and cooperation. The decision would not be easy, but for the first time in their long history, the Xantari were uncertain of their next step. The future of the galaxy was no longer defined by who could crush whom, but by the power of connection and empathy. And the humans, with their strange and unexpected gift, had set the stage for a new era, one where alliances could be forged through understanding, not force. Days passed since the historic meeting, and the galaxy remained on edge, its future hanging in the balance. The Xantari had agreed to an unprecedented alliance, but the seeds of change they had planted had yet to take root fully. As word spread about the humans' extraordinary connection with animals, whispers began to stir across the galaxy. Empathy as a force for power was an idea too radical for some, too unsettling for others. But in the halls of power and the chambers of influence, the Xantari had begun to deliberate on the next steps. Shelek, now burdened with the task of guiding his people through this uncertain era, paced in his private chamber. He had always prided himself on his decisiveness, his ability to lead with unyielding authority. Yet in the wake of the humans' demonstration, that same authority now felt tenuous. What if they were wrong? What if empathy, connection, and understanding could truly replace their centuries-old reliance on domination? Could they, as a people, redefine themselves? Across the galaxy, the Xantari were not the only ones grappling with these questions. Other species, watching the Xantari's unusual shift, began to question their own beliefs about power. The universe had always operated on a straightforward principle: might made right. But humanity had shown that there was more than one way to wield strength. Meanwhile, on Earth, Captain Cruz and her team were preparing for the next phase of their mission, a mission that now held a weight they hadn't expected. It was no longer just about showcasing humanity's bond with animals. It was about proving that this bond could be the catalyst for lasting peace across the galaxy. They had received an invitation from the Xantari to discuss potential peace talks, but Cruz knew that such a meeting could shape the course of history. She wasn't certain the Xantari were ready to fully embrace the changes they had suggested, but she was willing to try. As Cruz stood before the small council of her team, she could feel the gravity of the situation settling in. This was no longer just a diplomatic mission. It was a test of their core values. The humans' ability to understand animals had opened the door, but now they had to walk through it. Whatever happens in the next meeting, we can't afford to abandon what we stand for, Cruz said, her voice steady but firm. We're not here to force anyone to believe what we do, but we are here to show that there is another way, a better way. The Xantari are powerful, but they've been blinded by the idea that strength comes only from dominance. Our strength is in the connections we make with each other, with other species, with the universe. Max, always by her side, gave a small bark of agreement, his tail wagging. Cruz couldn't help but smile as she reached down to scratch behind his ears. It was a small comfort, a reminder that she had allies in every form. Animals had been her greatest teachers, and now they were part of something much larger than any single mission. Her thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of a transmission from Shalak. He was requesting a private meeting to discuss the next steps in their tentative alliance. There was no denying that the Xantari were cautious, still uncertain about how to approach the humans' vision of a galaxy united through empathy. But their willingness to listen, to even entertain the idea of change, was a victory in itself. As Cruz prepared for the meeting, she reflected on the fact that this was only the beginning. The path ahead was fraught with challenges. The Xantari were not going to suddenly abandon their entire way of life. The galaxy's other factions, those that thrived on conflict and conquest, would likely resist any attempt to change the status quo. But what they had shown the Xantari, and what they would continue to demonstrate, was that there was an alternative. And that alternative could bring about a new age of peace. The meeting with Shalak was set. Cruz felt a mixture of hope and apprehension. She knew that the power of empathy could change the galaxy, but first, the Xantari and the universe needed to believe in it. The galaxy had been shaped by war for millennia, and it would take more than a few kind words to shift that paradigm. But somewhere deep inside, Cruz felt the flicker of hope. The smallest spark had been ignited, and if the humans could hold fast to their beliefs, the galaxy's heart could be changed forever. They would show that understanding, not power, could shape the future. And perhaps, just perhaps, it was time for the Xantari and the rest of the galaxy to finally understand. The meeting room was unlike any Captain Cruz had ever stood in before. It wasn't just the opulence of the Xantari's Grand Council Hall, or the tense atmosphere that seemed to pulse with anticipation. It was the weight of history pressing down on her. Today would decide the future, not just for humans and Xantari, but for the entire galaxy. Shalak stood at the head of the room, his commanding presence undeniable, but there was something different about him now. His stance was less rigid, less certain. His eyes, usually filled with the sharpness of a strategist, now held the faintest hint of curiosity, of doubt. Captain Cruz couldn't help but wonder if he, too, had begun to question everything he had known about power and strength. The room was filled with the Xantari elite, all gathered to witness the continuation of humanity's bold experiment, an experiment that had already shaken the very foundations of the galaxy. Cruz's team stood behind her, their eyes filled with the same determination she felt. They had come this far, and now it was time to push forward, to show the galaxy what empathy, connection, and understanding could achieve. Shalak raised his hand, silencing the room, his voice rich with authority, but tempered by something new. We have heard your words. We have seen your actions. Now it is time to decide. Can we, the Xantari, truly embrace this new path? A path where the power we have wielded for centuries is not our strength, but our vulnerability. The question hung in the air, pregnant with possibility. For a moment, the room was still, the sound of distant stars outside the windows, the only thing breaking the silence. Cruz stepped forward, her gaze unwavering as she met Shalak's eyes. It's not about vulnerability. It's about unity. We've shown you that understanding, not domination, is the way forward. It's not just our power to connect with animals. It's our ability to listen, to see beyond ourselves and our differences. We're not asking you to surrender your strength, but to use it in a way that brings people together, not divides them. She paused, allowing her words to sink in. The Xantari, for all their might and arrogance, were beginning to see what humanity had to offer. They were a species that had survived the chaos of their own evolution by learning to work together, to build communities where empathy and cooperation thrived. And now, that very quality had the potential to change the galaxy. Dr. Toller, standing at the edge of the room, spoke up, his voice heavy with doubt. But what of the other powers in the galaxy? The ones who will never share your ideals, who will always fight to dominate. How do we ensure that peace doesn't crumble under the weight of their aggression? Captain Cruz turned to face him, her voice steady but filled with conviction. We can't control them, but we can change the way we respond. If we choose to meet aggression with empathy, if we show that we stand united for something greater than ourselves, we can begin to shift the tide. Change won't happen overnight, but if we stand together, it will happen. The room fell into a heavy silence again, but this time, it wasn't the tension of opposition. It was the weight of consideration. The Xantari delegates exchanged looks, their hardened faces betraying the flickers of uncertainty that had taken root within them. They had spent centuries conquering, ruling, and dominating. The very idea of peace through understanding was a radical departure from everything they had ever known. But the demonstration of the humans' power, the bond between them and their creatures, had left an impression no amount of military might could erase. Shalek's voice broke the silence, this time quieter, almost reverent. You ask us to reconsider everything we have fought for, to look beyond power and force. We are not certain we can embrace such a change. Cruz nodded, understanding the depth of the challenge. We don't expect you to change overnight. But what we're asking is that you start the journey. We're offering our hand, not to control, but to walk alongside you. For a moment, Shalek said nothing. Then, to the surprise of everyone in the room, he stepped down from the platform. The Xantari leader walked toward Captain Cruz, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but laced with the weight of a decision being made. Perhaps there is something to be learned from your kind, Shalek said. Perhaps it is time for us to rethink what it means to be strong. We will begin this journey with you. The Xantari will stand with the humans, not as conquerors, but as allies. The words hung in the air like a promise, not just to the humans in the room, but to the entire galaxy. The Xantari were shifting. The age of conquest and dominance was beginning to wane. As the delegates of the Xantari rose to their feet, a murmur of agreement rippled through the room. This was no simple agreement. It was the beginning of something far greater. The humans had shown them that true power did not lie in weapons or war, but in the bonds they could form with others, whether they were human, animal, or alien. And now, together, they would face the future. For the first time in galactic history, peace was not just a possibility. It was a reality waiting to unfold. The spark of empathy had been ignited, and the universe would never be the same again. The dawn of a new era had begun.